Chapter 22 of The Silkstocking Murders by Anthony Berkeley. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Last Victim. Roger arrived in Sutherland Avenue that afternoon for his vigil in a somewhat mixed frame of mind. He was certain that, at last, he was on the right lines. He was certain that he could not possibly complete the vast amount of investigation necessary within a mere 24 hours. He was certain that the police would make a colossal mistake if they really did arrest Gerald Newsome. He was certain now that Anne was mistaken in her identification of the solicitor with Arnold Beverley, and he was certain that he himself had not got the faintest idea who the man really was. On the whole, he was not sorry for the prospect of a couple of quiet hours in which to reflect on these difficult matters. Throwing his hat onto the table which, with a comfortably solid armchair, constituted the sole furniture of the little room, he dropped into the latter with a sigh of relief. The strain of the case was beginning to tell on him, and he felt tired. When it was over, if it ever was, he would go away and take a holiday somewhere. He had ascertained from Plato on the previous afternoon that the bell worked perfectly, and the 10-minute signals came through without a hitch. Glancing at his watch as he settled himself in the chair, he saw that it was exactly 2:30. As if to confirm its accuracy, a short, sharp tinkle sounded from the corner in which the bell had been installed. Roger laid the watch on his knee in order to check the intervals and tried to concentrate. As regards Anne, he was not unduly perturbed, even after the candid remarks which Newsome had addressed to him. The more one considered it, the more fantastic it seemed that, out of all possible victims, the murderer should hit on Anne. As to the attraction supposed to be exercised on a murderer by the scene of the crime, which might be believed to lure him back to Sutherland Avenue, Roger did not put any credence in it at all. But Anne had conceived the idea, and she thought she was doing something towards avenging her sister by carrying it out, so by all means let the poor kid go on with it. Thus Roger. Slowly the hands of the watch crept on to 3:15, 3:00, 1:30, and punctually at every 10 minutes the bell in the corner uttered an abrupt little ring. But to Roger no illumination came. He concentrated and concentrated. He cried presumptuously in his spirit, "Let there be light!" But no light appeared. He wandered dizzily through the endless mazes of the case, and every time found himself in a fresh blind alley. By 4:00 he had given it up in despair and was longing wholeheartedly for tea and companionship. He looked at his watch. The time was 3 minutes past 4. He started guiltily. Had the bell rung at 4:00, or hadn't it? He had been so immersed in his own woes that the rings of late had only been subconsciously noted. But now he was aware of a blank. No, he was sure there had been no ring at 4:00. He stood up. It was no good leaving a thing like this to chance. He must run across at once. After all, perhaps he had minimized the danger. What if the murderer had got hold of their plan and, fearing they might be on his trail, had determined to take this opportunity to rid himself of one of his pursuers? That was a possibility he had never considered. He looked at his watch again before putting it back in his pocket. It was practically 4:05. He hurried towards the door. As his hand touched the knob, the bell in the corner spoke at last, but this time its ring was loud, long, and insistent, the signal of alarm. Roger rushed down the stairs, 3 at a time, and into the next house. The sitting-room door resisted his efforts to open it. "Anne!" he called at the top of his voice, regardless of what the people in the flats below might think. "Anne!" There was a bump and a thud in the passage beside him, and Newsome appeared, tumbled out of his cubbyhole. "What's the matter?" he asked anxiously. "Alarm signal," panted Roger, pushing at the door with all his strength. "Can't get an answer. The man's inside, I think." Newsom joined him, adding a sturdy shoulder. Trying to find some other way of attacking it, Roger looked up, and what he saw made him feel for a moment quite sick. At the top of the door was a hook screwed firmly into the wood, and from it, disappearing over the door, was a thin strip of some silky-looking material. Roger shook Newsom's shoulder and pointed at it. "Charge the thing together," he grunted. "Not a second to lose." They drew back, paused for an instant, and then flung themselves forward, shoulders against the heavy crosspiece of the old-fashioned door. This time the obstruction, whatever it had been, gave way, and the door flew open. "Guard the doorway," Roger gasped as they tumbled into the room. He utilized the force of his motion to fling himself round the edge of the door. Hanging on the back of it, her feet a good 12 inches above the floor, was Anne. In the same movement, Roger lifted her up and shouted to Newsom to unfasten the stocking from the hook on the farther side, loosening the portion round her throat at the same time. As Newsom freed the stocking from the hook, Roger carried Anne over to a couch and laid her gently along it. "Get the fellow, Jerry," he said, without looking round. "I'll see to Anne." He bent over her. She was quite unconscious, and her face was horribly distorted, but to Roger's unspeakable relief she was still breathing. Without even a glance round the room, he began to flex her limbs and apply the usual methods of relief to her strained lungs. "I say," said Newsom's voice behind him, "this is ghastly. Is she alive?" "Yes, she'll be all right in a minute. Have you got him?" "There wasn't anybody. The room was empty. Except for Anne." "Nonsense," Roger retorted. "He must be in here somewhere. Look round and keep your eye on the door. He'll make a dash for it. I'll look after Anne. She's getting better already." Newsom made a circuit of the room, looking into every available hiding place, without result. The fox had gone to ground. "Then run out and telephone to Plato to come up here at once," said Roger, still bending over the unconscious girl. "Hurry!" "Look here, hadn't I better get a doctor first?" suggested Newsom, gazing down at Anne, whose bloodless lips were only just beginning to lose something of their ghastly hue. "She looks awful. We must—" "Go and telephone Plato," Roger cut in, speaking in an authoritative voice. "I'm in charge here now, Jerry, officially, and I want Plato up here as soon as he can get. We've got to consult whether to inform the police about this or not, and it all depends on what Anne has to tell us. She's all right. She'll be round in a few minutes, and we don't want a doctor unless we can't avoid it. He'd ask too many awkward questions. Go and telephone, there's a good fellow. I don't know whether there's an instrument downstairs or not. You can find out." Newsom hesitated for a moment. Then he went. Roger resumed his ministrations. Before Newsom returned 5 minutes later, Anne's eyelids were fluttering, and her hands were making little movements by her sides. "Thank God," Newsom muttered, noting these signs of returning animation. "Plato's got a directors' meeting on," he said to Roger. "He's not in his office. I left word that they were to get hold of him at once and send him up here on a matter of life and death." Roger nodded, and the two stood watching Anne. The next moment her head began to turn slowly from side to side on the cushion which Roger had placed under it. One hand went jerkily up to it and clutched her forehead. "My head," she whispered in a cracked little voice. "Oh, my head." Roger started violently and bent over her again, touching the back of her head with infinitely gentle fingers. He frowned. "Curious," he muttered, and went on feeling. Still almost completely dazed, Anne began to mutter, I'm going to be... Roger wheeled round suddenly on Newsom. "Jerry, get out!" "What?" asked the astonished gentleman. "Get out!" Roger snapped. "This is going to be no place for you. Hurry!" He herded the protesting Newsom forcibly from the room and locked the door on him. Hurling some dried leaves out of a large flower vase, he snatched it up and ran back to the couch. He was just in time. Wet nurse, dry nurse, 3 bags full, Roger was murmuring distractedly 3 minutes later, administering frantic first aid with a silk handkerchief in one hand and a cushion cover in the other. There, Anne, dear, are you feeling comfier, not to say tidier? Anne smiled at him with watery eyes. Roger Sheringham, she said, you're a dear, but I'll never be able to look you in the face again without blushing. Roger cast a harassed eye unostentatiously under the couch to make sure that the evidence was out of sight. He hit you on the head, didn't he? I should say he did, Anne agreed, feeling the back of it with cautious fingers. I guessed as much, Roger nodded, and just managed to get Jerry out of the room in time. Anne, did you see him? Yes. Anne was recovering quickly now. Roger, it was the solicitor. It was, eh? Top hat, beard, spectacles, and all? Yes, and gloves. I only caught one tiny glimpse of him, and he hit me before I could even open my mouth to scream. Or rather, I think I was so petrified with terror that I simply couldn't scream. I never heard a sound till he was right inside the room. I was reading and looked up, and there he was, with his right arm already lifted to hit me. She shuddered violently. Roger, I was terrified. Oh, and I thought once I was so brave. She began to laugh weakly, while her eyes filled with tears. Roger tried to soothe her, but she continued to giggle foolishly. Anne, stop, he said in desperation. Stop, or I'll kiss you. And she did not stop, so he did kiss her. Once, twice, 3 times, 4, 5, lots of times. It took Anne quite half a minute to realize what Roger was doing, and then she did stop. She stopped Roger, too. Roger, said Anne, blushing fiercely. If you get hysterical again, I'll kiss you again, Roger threatened unabashed. Anything to take her mind off what she's gone through. He was thinking behind his smile, and this seems the very best way. If you do, I'll be sick again, Anne retorted promptly. Roger judged that the cure was complete. But, oh, Anne murmured, holding her forehead, my head does ache. You poor child. Anne Manners, you're the pluckiest girl I've ever met, and you've solved our problem, remember. But we still don't know who he is. We're jolly soon going to, replied Roger grimly. He dived under the couch and retrieved the evidence, wrapping it decently in the cushion cover, and marched out to give it burial. I'll be back in a minute, he said airily. Very well, said Anne, looking at the ceiling and pretending hard not to know what he was doing. Outside the door, a wild-eyed Newsom confronted him. Is she all right? He babbled. I heard her making the most awful. She's all right. Roger cut him short. Go in and see for yourself. He stalked on to the cemetery. Some 20 minutes later, when Plato arrived, Anne was sufficiently recovered to be lying back in a chair and submitting to having her forehead bathed in eau de cologne by Newsom. Roger gave Plato a hasty account of what had happened, and the latter, evidently deeply shocked, congratulated Anne warmly on her pluck and her escape. Wedged the door with the chair underneath the handle, eh? He said, looking at the splintered object that had held up their attempts to enter. Yes, said Roger, it must have been very cunningly balanced. But in spite of everything, you couldn't identify the man? Plato asked Anne. She shook her head. I'm afraid not. He hardly gave me time, either. Plato frowned. This is very serious. Sheringham, do you realize that Miss Manners is by no means out of danger yet? This was no chance attack, you may be sure. He had some object, and it isn't attained. When he learns that, I'm very much afraid that he may make a second attempt. Yes, I'd thought of that, Roger nodded. We must get them away from here. Both of them. Miss Carruthers won't be safe here either. I quite agree. I think they should go as soon as possible. It's out of the question for them to appear at the theater tonight, even if Miss Manners were fit to, which she isn't. He thought for a moment. I have a small cottage in Surrey on the Banstead Downs. I can put that at their disposal. That's very good of you, Mr. Plato, Anne said gratefully. Thank you so much. Is that wise, though, do you think? Roger demurred. I'm inclined to think they'd be safer in London at one of the big hotels. Supposing they were traced down to Surrey, you see, isolation in a cottage might be even more dangerous than here. I see your point, Plato said, and paused. There was a moment's silence. Oh, Newsom, he went on, would you do something for me? I was called away from my meeting in a hurry, of course, and I find I've brought an important document with me. They'll be entirely hung up for it. Could you slip down to the city with it and hand it in at an address in Leadenhall Street for me? Newsom looked a little surprised at this rather cool request, and still more so when Roger proceeded strongly to back it. Yes, Jerry, there's nothing you can do here, and we mustn't forget in all this excitement that Platel's time is, quite truly, money. Cut along to Leadenhall Street, there's a good chap, and you can change and come back to my rooms afterwards. I'm dining with some people in Kensington for my sins, and they asked me to bring an extra man. You're going to be the extra man. But I say, expostulated the recipient of these commands. Jerry, said Roger, with mock severity, I'd have you remember that you're under orders. Now you've got 'em, so cut. His voice was light, but there was an undertone of real command in it. Newsom looked sulky, but prepared to obey. Oh, all right, I suppose, if you make such a point of it, he said, with no very good grace. Plato drew a long envelope out of his breast pocket, scribbled an address on it, and handed it over. Thank you very much, he said courteously. That will save a great deal of trouble. Newsom nodded and went out without a further word. Plato turned to Anne as if no rather uncomfortable atmosphere had been generated. I think, he said quietly, if you are feeling well enough that you should pack at once, Miss Manners. It's no good losing time, and the sooner you are out of here, the better. Oh, yes, Anne said cheerfully. I can manage now, I think. She rose and went out of the room. Plato, who had opened the door for her, shut it carefully. He waited for a moment, then walked up to Roger. In that short instant, his normally rather sallow face had become suffused with blood, and Roger could see that he was trembling all over. Now can you doubt, Sheringham? He said in a low voice that vibrated with passion. Now can you doubt? With the utmost deliberation, Roger drew out his pipe and began to fill it. Newsom, you mean? He said, matter-of-factly. His pointed ordinariness had its intended effect. Plato pulled himself together, though it cost him a visible effort to do so. The only one on the premises, the only one with the opportunity, the only one who even knew, he said in tones which still shook a little in spite of his attempts to keep them even. God, I could hardly keep my hands off his throat. Roger nodded casually. I'm afraid there can't be any doubt of it now. I couldn't believe it at first, but, well, as you say, it's impossible to think anything else now. You understood that was why I helped you to get rid of him. Yes, he mustn't learn where Miss Manners is going at any cost. My God, Sheringham, if he tries it again, I will take the law into my own hands. Now I'm certain. Nobody has a better right than I to punish that man. Roger, praying hard that no further hysterics should be inflicted on him, he could hardly try the same cure with Plato, grew more and more normal as the other grew warmer. Oh, I shouldn't do that, he said, as if he were talking about the next day's big race. You'll get your revenge, all right, when you see the judge calling for his black cap. This is a police matter, you must remember, and after this last effort it passes into their hands. And I know for a fact, he added confidentially, if it will make your mind any easier, that Newsom's arrest is only a matter of hours. Plato's eyes gleamed. Is that so? Then I think I may forego my private vengeance. Yes, of course, you're right, Sheringham. This is a police matter, but do you know how hard it is to realize that simple fact? All this time, I've looked on it as my matter, and nobody else's. I tried to get the police to move. You were there yourself, and it seemed that they did nothing. Oh, yes, they jolly well did," Roger interrupted. "They've put together a perfect case against Newsom, and this will clinch it. Don't you worry, Plato. The police have been busy, all right." "I'm very glad to hear it, but I shan't rest till he's under lock and key. Think, at any moment he may attack some other unfortunate girl." "That's all right," Roger said soothingly. "Didn't you hear me make sure of that? You can depend on it that I'm going to keep him under my eye for the short time he's still at liberty." "Thank you. I would have done so myself if you hadn't. Now, about these two girls. I agree that Surrey might be unwise. Where do you suggest?" "The Piccadilly Palace," Roger replied at once. "They'll be far safer in a big, noisy place like that than in a smaller one. I'll take them there myself." Plato nodded. "Excellent. Ring me up about them this evening, will you? It's very good of you to undertake all these duties, Sheringham. I feel I'm shirking my share, but as it happens, today is a very busy one with me, and though I'd gladly shelve everything if I can be of any real use, I will be extremely grateful if you can take on the smaller duties for me." "Of course," Roger said heartily. "That's quite all right. You push off at once if you're busy. There's nothing at all for you to stay for. I'll see to everything." And that, I suppose, Roger reflected as Plato went, just about sums up the Jewish outlook. They'd give up everything in the world to save the life of a dying friend, or even to ensure that he had a really luxurious funeral if he wanted one, but that doesn't prevent them from asking the undertaker for a cash discount. And why should it? We call it callous, but it's only practical. That's our trouble. We can't distinguish between real and false sentiment. And the Jews do. But it had been a nervous 10 minutes for all its aftermath of peaceful moralizing. End of chapter 22.